Hey everybody, welcome to our first lab in the urinary system. So obviously right here we've got a kidney, the organ that of course is always making urine in order to modify the blood and maintain its volume, its pressure, its electrolyte content, its pH content, etc. On top of the kidney we do see an adrenal gland making hormones like adrenaline, cortisol, aldosterone, etc. We do see the abdominal aorta sneaking down over here. We kind of get a little peek at the renal artery underneath the renal vein, and we see that inferior vena cava there as well. Now, in the kidney itself, notice there's an external region called the cortex. That's where urine formation occurs. And then there is a deeper region called the renal medulla, which, as you can tell, is made up of these discrete structures. Each is called a renal pyramid. Now, urine is always being made in the renal cortex. Urine is always traveling down through the renal pyramids, and urine is always dripping out of the tip of a pyramid. The tip of a pyramid is called a renal papilla, and the urine then ends up in this little tube here called a minor calyx. So next to every renal pyramid, we have a minor calyx. When two minor calyces combine, that creates a major calyx. Right here, all the minors and majors have joined together, and this is the renal pelvis, which narrows, leaves the kidney at an indentation called the renal hilum, and becomes the ureter, which travels towards the urinary bladder. One final thing we see here is this region between the pyramids. This is called a renal column. So we have a renal column here, we have a renal column here, and here as well. All right, so we jump down to the urinary bladder. Note the ureter on each side. We see an opening for the ureter here and here. We also see a urethra. This is the prostatic urethra because it's going through this prostate gland. So obviously this is a male in this model here. Here is the opening to the urethra, the internal urethral orifice. Now notice how much of the mucosa of the urinary bladder is thrown into these folds, which are called rugae. They're there for expansion. We saw them in the stomach, in the gallbladder, in the vagina as well. But between the three openings, two for the ureters, one for the urethra, there is a smooth region which does not have rugae, and this is called the trigone, and this will help funnel urine into the urethra. Also note we do see the smooth muscle of the urinary bladder, which is called the detrusor muscle. It detrudes or pushes out urine. And right here, even though it's not colored any different, there is a ring of smooth muscle here and here, kind of encircling the urethra. And the ring of smooth muscle here would be the internal urethral sphincter. Okay, got another kidney here, another kidney, right? Here's the adrenal gland, here's the inferior vena cava, renal vein, renal artery. I don't like this model too much. I don't like the artwork of it, but hey, we got it. Here's the renal cortex out here. These reddish guys represent the renal pyramids, which make up the renal medulla. Here's the end of a pyramid, which is a renal papilla. This would be a minor calyx, major calyx, renal pelvis, and ureter. We got the same model, just jump down to the urinary bladder. We see the ureter. Here's the bladder itself. Here's the prostate gland. Here's the urethra. This is a boy again because we got prostate gland. We also see some other male reproductive structures. This is a seminal vesicle here, and this is a vas deferens. Reproductively speaking, the vas deferens carries the testicular fluid and sperm from the testes. Seminal vesicles add seminal fluid. Prostate gland adds prostatic fluid. And the combination of those three things ends up making up the majority of semen. All right, nice big kidney here. Renal artery going in, branching to give me some segmental arteries. This is a segmental artery. It is branching, giving me interlobar artery running between the pyramids. Interlobar artery branches to give me an arcuate artery curving over the pyramids. This arcuate artery right here has several branches extending through the cortex. These are called interlobular arteries. Now, we've got lots of arteries depicted here, not as many veins, but of course, even though they're only depicting a few of the veins, we've got many copies of them. Like, for example, there is not just one interlobular vein, there is many, and we see one of them here. This is an arcuate vein here. This is an interlobar vein right here. And there's actually no such thing as a segmental vein, so the interlobar veins continue until they become the renal vein. So those are the blood vessels, all new stuff to us, well, except for the renal artery and vein here. We also see the external connective tissue covering of the kidney, that is the fibrous capsule. And here, of course, is the cortex, where we're making urine. The pink guys are the pyramids, which collectively make up the medulla. Tip of a pyramid is a papilla. Drips urine into a minor calyx. So here's a minor calyx, here's a minor calyx, and two minors unite here to make a major calyx. When all the majors and minor calyces have joined together, so right here, in other words, that is the renal pelvis, which leaves the renal hilum, narrows, and becomes the ureter. All right, just another model here. We got our abdominal aorta. We got our renal artery leading to the kidney. We see our renal vein coming out. We see an adrenal gland. We see a ureter. If we look over here, here is the cortex of the kidney on the very outside. These lined areas represent the pyramids of the medulla. Here is a papilla, and we got a minor calyx here. When minors and majors unite, we end up with the renal pelvis right there. Not my favorite model. It's okay. Here's the urinary bladder. We see the ureters going to it. There's a vas deferens on each side because this is a boy. Seminal vesicles, prostate gland. Again, not my favorite model, but it's not bad. All right. Let me backtrack for a second here. Check out this arcuate artery right here, okay? That arcuate, or actually better yet, check out this arcuate artery and vein right here, okay? We're going to zoom in on this, like where that 15 is and kind of above it and below it. We're going to zoom in on that, all right? That's what we've done here. This is the arcuate artery. This is the arcuate vein. Here is an interlobar artery. Interlobar brings blood to the arcuate. Arcuate branches to give me an interlobular. Now, what I'm going to see here are some of the microscopic vessels coming off the interlobular vein. Number 6 here, this is an afferent arteriole. It goes to a ball of capillaries called the glomerulus. The glomerulus is where we filter blood. It's a ball of fenestrated capillaries. Their small holes act as excellent filters. The filtered fluid called filtrate ends up flowing through these renal tubules that we see here, okay? We're going to modify the filtrate in the renal tubules, and eventually by the time it gets over here, it'll be urine. Now, blood leaving the glomerulus goes into an efferent arteriole, which then gives rise to these red guys here. These red guys represent the peritubular capillaries. So, this is the glomerulus. We filter blood there. We get a fluid called filtrate. It flows through these renal tubules. This first guy right here is called the proximal convoluted tubule. And notice how it is adjacent to peritubular capillaries. So good stuff that got filtered and ended up in the filtrate, like glucose, for example, is going to be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. Any bad stuff in the blood that did not get filtered is going to get secreted into the filtrate. So in this proximal convoluted tubule, it's going to work with the paratubular capillaries to do reabsorption and secretion. The proximal convoluted tubule then becomes this loop of Henle, which is surrounded by its own capillaries called the vasa recta. The loop of Henle is going to eventually help us reabsorb more water from our urine in order to concentrate it. The loop of Henle becomes the distal convoluted tubule. The distal convoluted tubule is another site of reabsorption secretion. It's where we do like final finishing touches on those processes. And by the time we get to this tube here, this tube is a collecting duct and it'll contain urine. Now notice all these capillaries here eventually empty into an interlobular vein, which empties into an arcuate vein, which empties into an interlobar vein. And of course, above the arcuate, so up here is cortex, down here is medulla. Same idea, just different model. Here's the arcuate artery, interlobular artery. These guys are afferent arterioles. They're going into a glomerular capsule, which surrounds the glomerulus. And we're actually seeing the outside of that glomerular capsule, which is called the parietal layer of the glomerular capsule. If I go back for a second, this is the parietal layer of the glomerular capsule. It's just been cut open to show me the capillaries inside. We also see efferent arterioles coming out. Notice the afferent is big, the efferent is little. That maximizes glomerular pressure, which is essential for filtration. I also see some paratubular capillaries here, then my interlobular vein, and my arcuate vein. As far as the structures for carrying filtrate and urine go, the orange guy here is my proximal convoluted tubule. Proximal because it's so close to the glomerular capsule. Convoluted because it's super twisty. The proximal convoluted tubule is my primary site of reabsorption and secretion. Proximal convoluted tubule eventually gives rise to the loop of Henle, which helps me concentrate urine. It becomes the distal convoluted tubule. That's where I do more reabsorption secretion to finalize my urine production. Then this yellow guy here is a collecting duct, which would contain urine. All right, we got all the same things here, just in a different model. So go ahead, take a look at this, pause it if you need to. I'm not going to go through this one because we already did it twice. Same idea here, same stuff. Nothing new. Nothing new at all. Same stuff here. Just like multiple versions of the same thing. But what we're going to do now is kind of slice open that glomerular capsule a little bit. I can see the glomerulus inside a little better. I can see the parietal glomerular capsule and how then it connects to the proximal convoluted tubule right here. So nothing new here, just like a slightly different view. Now I'm zooming in on the glomerulus and its surroundings. Here's the afferent arteriole right here. So the red tubes in here are the glomerular capillaries. Then this is the efferent arteriole over here. Notice that the glomerular capillaries are covered by these cells that are kind of like off-whitish in color here. These are called podocytes. They actually help form the filter that filters the blood. And collectively, the podocytes make up the visceral layer of the glomerular capsule. Then, of course, out here, this simple squamous lining is the parietal layer of the glomerular capsule. Same idea here. Here's the afferent and efferent arterioles. The tubes in here are the glomerular capillaries. And on half of them, we see the podocytes. Podocytes have these legs which stick out and interdigitate to help create the filter, because the job of this is filtering blood. Now, the filtrate would be found in the lumen of this glomerular capsule here. This is the parietal layer here. Then the filtrate flows downward into this distal convoluted tubule. tubule. And that is our quick run through of these urinary system models. I know it was fast. It's hard not to be fast in these videos sometimes. But all right, check that out. Watch it again if you need to. Let me know if you have any questions. As always, I'm happy to help. See you later. Bye.